The city stank of tar and tide, the river's breath sour in the hour before dawn. Lanterns swung on chains below the mud gate, sketching dull orange moons on water slick as oil. Ned Stark stood at the arched casement of the Tower of the Hand and watched the first barge nose along the black mirror of the Blackwater rush. The ferryman's pole flicked water like a switch. Far out, in the stretch where the currents tugged toward the sea, the lanterns of the harbor towers were pinpricks against a lid of cloud. He laid his palm flat against the stone sill as if the granite could steady him. The city breathed in his bones. It was a sick lung. Behind him, the room was quill scratches and candle ends and the sweet acrid tang of sealing wax. On the table lay the book of lineages he had worried to pieces, its leather cracked more by his hands than time's. He had fallen asleep with it open twice this week, face pressed to the parchment, and woken with the taste of dust in his teeth. Robert's letter lay beside it, the royal seal broken but the words unbroken, words that called him protector of the realm until the rightful heir took the throne. Words were wind in this city, yet they were the truest wind he had. He heard Desmond's boots before the door opened. The man's weight always leaned on his left foot. It made a lube-dub out of his step, like a slow heart. "You sent for me, my lord," Desmond said, closing the door softly. "And for him." Ned turned. The old knight's white cloak filled the doorway. Ser Barristan Selmy had a way of carrying his years like an old sword. Well-honed, no flash, the steel's core left clear to see. His hair was white as the wall beyond the world, close-cropped, his jaw clean-shaven. He had not yet put on his enameled plate, but the white cloak alone was armor enough for who he was. "Ser Barristan," Ned said. "Lord Stark." A courteous incline. The man's courtesy had edges. Barristan's gray eyes took the room in, the disordered papers, the brute fact of Robert's letter, and then returned to Ned's face. "You asked for me alone. That is unusual. Everything is unusual today." Ned gestured to the table. "Robert named me protector." His hand held the quill. He knew they would come for it. Barristan crossed the room with unhurried steps and looked down, his shadow long and straight over the table. He read every word, the way men read oaths. When he lifted his gaze, Ned thought he saw a flicker of sorrow pass across the old knight's face, like a fish under ice. "I stood over him when he died," Barristan said. "He forbade me to weep." He laid 2 fingers on the signature. "He was a hard man to love. Hart men die hart. Hard or soft, dead is dead. And law is law," Ned said. He lifted the book of lineages. "You know what I found. Every King Robert's lawful get would have his coloring," Barristan said. "Black of hair, blue of eye. It is a song that has never changed its key." "Aye," Ned swallowed. "Joffrey has his mother's hair, and her brother's face. Stannis will claim the throne. Renly will take the field for adoration and banners. Tywin will take it for gold. And Cersei will break it all before she lets the truth be spoken where the stones can hear. My men are dead or scattered. The city watch answers to coin. The small council is a spider's web. And yet," he said, feeling the words settle like steel links in a chain, "I will do my duty. I will keep Robert's will. I will keep the law." Barristan's eyes did not leave him. "You expect me to abandon the boy crowned before the realm? I expect you to know the difference between a crown and a lie," Ned said too quickly, then checked his temper. He had not slept. The city's heat had pressed on his chest all night. He drew a breath. "Forgive me, sir, I come to you because you have seen kings up close and found them wanting. Because the white of your cloak belongs to the realm's idea of itself, not to any one head. If the Kingsguard swears to protect the king and his family, surely that presumes there is a king to protect. The Seven made no proviso for bastards on thrones," Barristan said quietly. "The Seven made no proviso for pyres of children either," Ned said. "Yet we have known both in our time. I am not asking you to draw sword against a child. I am asking you to stand for the law while I remove a queen from the seat she took by deceit and hold her children safe until their uncle comes to claim them." "Stannis," Barristan said, as if tasting iron. He is a hard man too, harder than Robert. Hard men may break before they bend, but they do not lie about their sons. He will rule, and not well loved, but he will rule by rule. Ned let the book fall shut. Help me, Ser Barristan. Help me make this city belong to the realm for a day. Help me walk to the throne room and speak the truth before your white cloaks, and the gold cloaks, and the gods. After, if you condemn me for it, you can cut me down in the sight of all, and I will not resist. I will go to my gods knowing I did it in the clean daylight. Barristan was very still. He looked older in the gray dawn. The White Sword Tower lay 4 floors away and a world apart. His brothers slept there, who would likely call him Oathbreaker if he chose. He had stood on hot sand against a dragon prince. He had eaten a lifetime of ashes. Something in his gaze softened, and Ned saw the shadow of a younger man. The one songs had chased across tourney fields. Do not speak to me of oaths as if I have not tasted them, Barristan said, and his voice, though low, struck the room like a hammer. I swore to Ares, and I fed children to that promise by standing blind in the heat of my vow. And then I swore to Robert, and watched him break himself on wine and women while the realm learned to love the breaking. I have been a sword for kings. Today I will be the last thing I have left the strength to be. He touched the white cloak at his shoulder. I will be the law. They did not shake hands. They were not boys in the yard. Ned bowed his head and felt some tightness ease in his chest, as if a long knot had given. Then we move. Cersei will call the council at first light. She will tear the letter. She will give the gold cloak's orders purchased last night. We must move before she fixes her nets. Janos Slint, Barristan said, a name like a knuckle. He is not loyal to words or men. He is loyal to purses, and to whoever he thinks will fill them when the day ends. Then he must go, Ned said. I will name another in Robert's name, and the watch will take its orders from him. Jacelyn Bywater, Barristan said at once, gaunt as a spear. A soldier first and a politician never. He will die before he sells your words. I pray he does not have to die, Ned said. Prayers felt thin in this place. He turned to Desmond. Find Bywater. Bring him to the barracks and tell the watch captains to muster in the yard. No orders relayed until I stand there with the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard at my side. Quietly, if Janos smells it, he will bite. Desmond nodded. Aye, my lord. He looked to Barristan as if measuring a thing in himself and finding it taller. Sir. When Desmond had gone, Barristan's mouth made a line. Littlefinger will be with her. So will Pycelle, Ned said. And Varys, the spider, will do what serves his web. But Peter. He thought of the man's laugh like knives in cream, of the way he had leaned forward, candid as a confessor, to promise gold cloaks that had not come. I gave him my trust for half a heartbeat. He put a dagger at my throat with the other hand. Ned lifted Robert's letter again and slid it into his doublet. We will have to cut webs this morning. Barristan fastened his cloak with the simple silver brooch he always wore, a wingless dove, old and plain. I will go to my brothers, he said. They will not all follow. Some will wait to see who lives. Then let them wait, Ned said. We will be the men who do not. He slipped Ice's pommel into his hand, feeling the old wolf dream stir. The image of a winter wood, of breath steaming where it met air. He rested his palm there and left it. Today would not be won by a lord's greatsword in a hall. Today would be won by the harder blade of an old knight's name and the cold law cut clean through lies. They went out together. The corridor stank faintly of rushes gone sour. Servants were already moving, light-footed as shadows, carrying trays or buckets. They melted away from white and gray like water finding stone. In the courtyard, the air had the copper taste of storm, though no rain had fallen yet. Ned felt it on his tongue as they crossed to the barracks. Gold cloaks were already in the yard at Barristan's word. 30, then 50, then 200 as men were routed from their pallets and told to stand under the banners of their companies. The sergeants kept the line straight. There were good men among them. Ned had seen them too seldom. Their captain, a gray hawk with a scar across a sunburnt cheek, snapped the pole of his banner to attention when he saw the white cloak and the gray wolf beside him. Before the captains could salute, Desmond rode in with a lean rider whose patrol cloak sat like a shadow over his mail. He swung down and came directly to the point, as Barristan had known he would. "Lord Stark," Jacelyn Bywater said, bowing skeleton straight. His face might have been hewn, all angled bone and tendon.
"Ser Barristan."
"What is this?" "The law," Barristan said, enough iron in the word that several captains blinked. "There are orders for the City Watch to act as private swords in a family quarrel. That ends now." Ned drew out Robert's letter and read it aloud, his voice carrying across the yard. He did not give it flourish. The words needed no polish. When he was done, he held the letter high. "By this, I name Jacelyn Bywater commander of the City Watch in Janos Slint's place. I strip Janos Slint of rank and salary and send him to the wall for taking bribes to sell the realm's safety." Silence took a step out of the ranks and looked at them. Men glanced to one another. The yard had the brittle feel of frost on a puddle. Then Bywater went to one knee and bowed his head, and the captains followed one by one until the yard held a sea of bent shoulders. The sound when they rose, steel and leather and the soft exhale of breath, was like the first ripple wind makes on a still tarn. "Where is Slint?" Barristan asked. "Snoring at his mistress's bed or counting coin in his house," Bywater said. "He was seen at Peter Baelish's counting house last evening." "Take 10 men you trust," Ned said. "Bring him to the Red Keep in irons. Quietly. If he resists, he is to be taken nonetheless. No blood if it can be helped. If it cannot, then let it be swift." Bywater inclined his head once and was gone in a flurry of orders. Ned watched the yard, the men settling into the new shape of the morning. Change had a sound, he was learning it. "When the council meets," Barristan said softly, "Cersei will tear the letter. She will claim the crown's prerogative. She will expect you to bring the gold cloaks she has bought and bend your knee to her son. I will bring the City Watch I have not bought and walk past her boy to stand at the foot of the throne," Ned said. "And I will ask you to stand at my shoulder." "Do not ask it," Barristan said, those old eyes steady. "Expect it. Only then will the others doubt themselves enough to hesitate." Ned looked at him and nodded once. Commander, he thought, not for the first time. But the realm had not put a sword in this man's hand, so he might be anything else. They parted. Barristan took the stairs up the White Sword Tower 2 at a time, his breath hardly quickening. The tower's room was as bare as a beggar's table. White wood, white plaster, white cloth. His brothers had left their cloaks folded on pegs and slept in their linen. Now they were waking, rubbing fists in eyes and blinking at their Lord Commander as if he'd brought the winter in with him. "Meryn," Barristan said. Meryn Trant had a face like a closed fist.
"Ser."
"Arm and saddle," Barristan said. "Ares, Preston, Mandan, Boros, we are summoned to the throne room when the council meets. I will be there before you. You will come with your cloaks clean and your blades honest." He looked to Ares Oakheart, so young it hurt, jaw smooth as a girl's, eyes full of notions of songs. "You will obey my word as Lord Commander." "What word is that?" Meryn said. There was a moist sneer in it. "The word is law," Barristan said, and it fell without clangor. He did not wait for their faces to finish their twists. He turned and left. He had never shouted to be obeyed. He found Sandor Clegane in the stables. The hound was fitting a bridle to a mean-tempered courser with scars like old trenches. "The boy will want you at his side," Barristan said. "The boy never knows what he wants," Sandor said without looking up. "He only knows when he's not getting it." He lifted the bridle's bit and clacked it in the horse's teeth. "What do you want, old man?" "I want you to stand out of the way when honest men do their work," Barristan said. Sandor laughed, a sound without humor. "Honest men." He set the bridle and turned then, meeting Barristan's gaze. The burn scars on one half of his face made the other half look too ordinary, as if man and mask had swapped sides. Honest men die like liars when a haul goes wrong, but I never mind a good show. Just keep the little shit from the edge of the swords. I intend to keep every child in this castle from the edge of every sword, Barristan said. Even him. Sandor lifted a shoulder. Do as you like. I'll be where my wage is. He led the horse out. Barristan watched him go. There was no use in asking a dog to be a cat. By the time the bells of Baelor September began their first fumbling calls to morning prayer, the small council had gathered in the throne room like carrion birds shy of the feast. Sunlight came slant through high windows and cut the dust into pillars. Pycelle stood very straight and breathed very loud, beard sweeping his chest like a white tide. Peter Baelish looked as if he were half in a smile. He would only finish if the room turned his way. Varys smoothed his sleeves and offered his hands like a man who had nothing to hide anywhere. Cersei sat below the throne, which gleamed like a storm caught and set into iron. Joffrey was not yet there. Men were still fitting him into a king that did not fit. Tommen and Myrcella were sequestered. The keep held its breath around them. Ned entered with the measured tread he had learned in Cold Gods Would Snow. He walked the long runner, the hush thickening behind him. The scrape of his boots was a metronome that ticked out the seconds of one life and into another. On his left walked Ser Barristan in white. On his right, a half-dozen captains of the City Watch in honest mail. Behind, the sound of more boots, men in gold cloaks, disciplined. Cersei watched him as a cat watches a bird that has not seen the window between them. The morning had left her hair unbound. It fell like poured gold over green velvet. Her smile was a knife turned to admiration by the light. "Lord Stark," she said, "it is a joy to see you on your feet. Such a terrible accident you suffered. One must be grateful to the gods for their mercy." Ned let her voice fall on him as if it were rain. He took out Robert's letter without a flourish and handed it to Pycelle. "Read," he said. Pycelle bent, the beads on his chain clattering softly. He made a show of difficulty, then found his place and read. The language was plain and did not lift itself, yet each sentence landed like a stone into still water, sending ripples to the walls and back. When he finished, he held the letter out toward Cersei, as if he dared not be the one to keep it. Cersei came slowly, plucked the parchment with 2 fingers as if she feared her rings might be stained by the oils of ordinary hands, and looked along it as if worth lay in the shapes not truly seen. Then she tore the letter neatly in half. The sound was small but real. She handed the halves to the air and let them fall to the floor. "The king is dead," she said. "His son sits the throne. That is the law we have lived with and will live with. Titles given by dying men drunk on milk of the poppy do not unmake blood." She turned her head slightly. "Where is my son?" The doors at the back swung wide and Joffrey Baratheon entered with strides borrowed from plays of kings. The crown sat on his hair like a thing that had chosen its owner badly. His lip was already curling around orders. Sandor Clegane took his place at the right foot of the dais and leaned back against the wall with a look that pretended to be boredom and was something else. Joffrey's gaze found Ned and flared like a torch at tallow. "You," he said, "on your knees, traitor. Guards, seize him." "You will not," Barristan Selmy said, and in that white sound was a finality that silenced even Cersei. Barristan took a step forward and in the step put down the weight of every battle he had fought. "You will not lay a hand on Lord Stark." "Ser Barristan," Cersei said, recovering, putting a queen's training between herself and surprise. "You forget your place." "I have stood in my place longer than you have lived in yours," Barristan said without heat. He turned not to Joffrey, but to the hall. "This is the throne room of the 7 kingdoms. It is not the parlor of a house. It is not a staging for a mummer's play. The man who sits that throne must have leave from law and gods alike. I was sworn to guard that seat. I do so now." Ned's throat felt new and very old at once. He took a step forward and let the hall hear him. "I speak then. Robert Baratheon left his will naming me protector until the rightful heir takes the throne. His lawful heir is Stannis Baratheon, Lord of Dragonstone. The boy on this dais is no son of Robert's body. I have proof. He lifted the battered book, his voice steady. And I have the Queen's confession of her. You know what I name, he finished, not gifting the word to the air, for the children's ears if not their mothers. Joffrey will be confined with his brother and sister, unharmed. The Queen will be demoted to Lady of Casterly Rock and kept in gentle custody until Lord Stannis comes. Cersei's face moved through 4 shapes before it settled. Kill him, she said lightly. Gold cloaks at the sides shifted, but their captains did not move. Bywater's gaunt shadow had found the walls like a second pillar. Stand fast, he said. The watch did not breathe. Kingsguard, Cersei cried, and her voice rose injudiciously. Ser Meryn, Ser Boros, Ser Mandon, Ser Preston. Stand to, Barristan said, and white cloaks hesitated in mid-stride as if a hand had gripped the cogs of their bodies. Aerys Oakheart looked from Barristan to Cersei and back, color draining from his lip. Meryn Trant moved a fraction toward the dais, hand on hilt. Barristan's eyes found him, and the slight shake of his head was not a threat and not a plea. It was a truth. Meryn's hand paused and slid from the hilt to hang. His face closed. Sandor, Joffrey said, breathless with a kind of gilded rage. Kill the wolf and I will give you. The hound spat on the floor. A neat arc. You'll give me words, boy. I've had my fill of them. He looked at Ned, then at Barristan. I won't cut old men for a lie's sake, he said. Nor girls neither. His eyes flicked to where Sansa stood in a cluster of ladies. Cheeks white, hands clenched. Do what you like with your crown. The hall changed. There was a kind of low, near sound, the way a sea shifts under a sudden wind. Then, Cersei moved, quick as a viper, and reached for Joffrey's arm to pull him back behind the throne. Barristan was there before her, not with a drawn sword, but with an arm like a bar. He took Joffrey by the shoulder harder than etiquette allowed and turned him, firmly but not ungently, down from the dais. How dare you lay a hand on the king? Cersei began. When the king comes to the throne, I will keep all hands from him, Barristan said. Until then, I will keep him from a throne that is not his to sit. His grasp was sure. Joffrey struggled, his mouth dragging out insults, threats. The tantrum music Ned had heard from Lord sons who could beat dogs without reproof and thought that made them men. Barristan moved him past Ned, past Bywater, toward the corridor that led to the royal apartments. Cersei lunged. Ned reached and caught her wrist. He did not grip hard. He looked into her eyes and saw in them an animal in a trap that had not been set for her but had caught her all the same. He will not be harmed, he said. No harm to your children, that I swear. This is not vengeance. It is treason, she breathed, and he smelled wine and fear. You think the lion's teeth are at your mercy. They are not. My father will. I know what your father will do, Ned said. We will answer him with law. That is a language that roars quieter than his, but it is the only one I speak. She tried to wrench free, then stopped and stood with her chin lifted. He released her. For a heartbeat he thought she might strike him. She did not. She drew her skirts aside and glided to her chair, set herself with a queen's unassailable poise, and folded her hands. In that gesture there was a promise. Whatever you think you have done, you have not finished with me. Ned looked once more to Sansa. She looked back at him, eyes glassy with disillusion, and he saw in that moment that she had been taught something, and that it had hurt. Arya was not in the hall. He blinked, surprised by a pulse of fear. The morning had many corners. He turned to the watch. Take the queen into custody. Gentle hands, gentlemen. She is to be confined to Maegor's holdfast with her handmaidens. She will have food sufficient and comfort fitting. The princes and the princess are to be kept together. No man is to speak to them without my leave. He lifted his chin a fraction. Ser Barristan. I will see them safe, Barristan said, with his hand still on Joffrey, who had found the notion of spitting. It missed Barristan's cheek by a child's breadth. Barristan did not flick it aside. He did not wipe his face. He simply stood and, somehow, the spittle seemed to have dried in the air. Petyr Baelish had been very still through all of this, as if stillness hid him better than motion. Now he smiled, the half-smile completing itself as if it had always been meant for this moment. "Well done," he said lightly. "Honor has discovered a knife after all. You should have asked me for one sooner. I have a gift for such things." "Seize him," Ned said to the watch, and Bywater did not so much as nod before two of his men had Petyr by the arms. Petyr mocked a little bow between their grips. "And the Grand Maester," Ned went on. Pycelle started like a horse smelling smoke. "He will be kept in his chambers until I have had time to look into his counsel." Varys folded his hands over his stomach and inclined his head. "I am, as ever, the realm's most humble servant," he murmured. "You will remain at your place," Ned said to him. "I will have need of messages flown to Dragonstone and to Storm's End. The ravens will go with the truth." His gaze went to Renly Baratheon, who had stood aside like a man watching a dangerous game and looking for the moment to step in and flip the board. The look in Renly's green eyes was almost admiration. "You, my lord, will dine with me tonight, or, if you prefer, ride at once for Highgarden. But you will not attempt to steal children in the night." Renly's mouth moved in what might have been a jest he thought better of. "I have always preferred to steal hearts," he said at last. "But I will take your meaning as you intended it." He bowed well and deep. "We will speak at dinner." They would not, as it turned out. The keep moved as if a shell had been cracked and a creature inside it had shifted. Barristan escorted the king that was not down corridors lined with carved stone that still thought itself dragons. Joffrey alternated bristles with quivering, savaging Barristan with words as a boy whips a dog he depends on. When they reached the apartments, Tommen and Myrcella were waiting, white and wide-eyed and looking at their mother's absence as if the air had gone thinner. Barristan gentled his tone to Myrcella in a way he had not to her brother. "You will come with me, sweetling, only for a time. The Lord Protector has given his word you will not be harmed." "Protector?" Joffrey sneered. "He will." "Enough," Barristan said, and the single word had an old room's patience. "Tell your sister not to be afraid." He did not add, "Tell yourself the same." One does not ask a boy like that for a thing he cannot give. They were set in rooms with shutters that caught the light like held breath. Barristan set a watch at the doors with men whose faces he knew and left them with their nursemaids and a guard of women. He trusted not to feed the children poison for bought loyalty. There were more of those in King's Landing than one might think. The poor loved children too. On the way back to the throne room he heard shouting. Not the mass shout of a hall breaking, but a contained struggle's ugly sound. Barristan moved toward it without speed and without slowness. He came around a corner and found Meryn Trant with half a dozen Lannister men-at-arms in red cloaks facing a man in mottled silks and a little girl with a sword needle in her hand. The girl's eyes were winter clear. Meryn had blood on his cheek and his blade was up. "Syrio," Barristan said, because of course it was. The first sword of Braavos had a courtesy in his stance that had nothing to do with bows. "Ah," Syrio said, "the morning has its surprises." He did not turn his head to look at Barristan. His footwork was a dancer's. "This is not a fight for children." "It is not a fight at all," Barristan said. "Ser Meryn, lay down your sword." "She attacked the king's guard," Meryn said, and the priss in his voice made the blood on his cheek look borrowed from another man. "You came to seize Lord Stark's daughter against the Lord Protector's order," Barristan said. "Lay down your sword." Meryn's mouth made a line. The Lannister men glanced sidelong, their shorty of red cloaks destabilized. Syrio had a half-smile that seemed designed to make proud men's hearts worse. "Ser Barristan," Meryn said with stiff dignity, "I answer to the Queen." "You answer to the Lord Commander of your order," Barristan said. He stepped forward and in the same motion moved the girl with the needle behind him with a hand that did not look like it could move boulders but did. He held Meryn with his eyes. "Lay down your sword," he said once more. Meryn moved. It was not a lunge. It was the twitch of a man too long certain that fear did his work for him. Barristan had anticipated every twitch men like this could make 30 years ago. He caught Meryn's wrist with a grip that opened a hand by pain and sent the sword clattering. He could have broken the wrist and did not. He thought of vows and left the bone unshattered. He took the sword and handed it to a gold cloak behind him without looking. "Take Ser Meryn into custody," he said calmly. "Use a kindness he does not know." "You cannot," Meryn began. "I can," Barristan said, and the men knew it even if the words had not told them. The Lannister men looked to each other and then back to their own hands, as if surprised to find them empty. "You may escort him to the cells," Barristan added to them, a crumb of dignity they could carry to their next duty if they found one. Syrio inclined his head. "You move very well for an old man," he said. "I move very little," Barristan replied. "But I choose where." He turned to the little girl. "Arya Stark," he said, her chin lifted. "Yes, you were about to do something very brave and very foolish," Barristan said. "Save brave for when foolish will not get you killed. Go to your father." "I can help," she said, stubborn. "You help him by obeying him," Barristan said. It felt strange on his tongue. He had no children, but he had known children. He had watched them die for old men's stubbornness and clever men's plans. "Go," he said, softening the one word. She went, twitching like a string plucked. Syrio watched her go and then looked at Barristan. "We will speak again," the Braavosi said in the voice of a man who may be here today and in the stepstones tomorrow. He flourished his wooden sword and bowed and was gone like a thought that takes you away for a moment and leaves you with the sense of a dance you could not learn if you lived 3 more lives. By mid-afternoon, the keep had made a new shape of itself. The queen was kept with her women in rooms whose shutters admitted light like milk poured through gauze. The children were with her at hours but never without eyes on them. The small council met under guard. Peter sat in a cell where the air was thick and kept his humor the way men keep a coin under their tongue. Pycelle wept and complained and demanded and was given dry bread and a stool with a cushion. Varys glided. Ned signed papers. Bywater sent runners. Ravens were loosed with strips of truth tied to their legs. The city outside took the news like a dog takes a bone. First with frenzy, then with delight, then with an argument you could not predict. Renly Baratheon came to dinner and did not stay to eat. He came at twilight in a cloak the color of dusk on leaves, a stag in gold at his shoulder, and took a seat at Ned's table without waiting. "I will make this easy," he said. "You have pulled an arrow from the realm's flesh, Lord Stark, but the wound will bleed. Stannis is salt for wounds. He has no sons. He has no smiles. He will never make the realm love the crown again. I would. Law is not a garden where love is the only weather," Ned said. "Stannis is the rightful heir." Renly spread his hands. "Rightful," he said, the word tasting strange in his mouth. "I was a boy in Stormwinds like you cannot imagine while my brother and Stannis saved our lives with flint and stubbornness. Stannis is stone. He will grind you into grit when you disagree with him. Is that the king you would appoint?" He leaned forward. "Let me give the realm a different meal. The Reach will pour out for me. Mace Tyrell dotes on me. I take Highgarden as an ally and open half the realm to peace at once. Crown me and let the rest of it fall in line." Ned felt the old ache at the base of his skull. "We do not crown by convenience. We do in practice," Renly said, and there was a sudden iron there. A glimpse of the boy who had lived through a siege that ate rats by its end. "We always have. We did for your friend. We did for his grandfather. We are a realm of pragmatists who tell ourselves stories about divine right. Tell the story you can live with." "I will tell the story that will let me look my children in the eyes," Ned said. "And you yours. I will not set aside a man's right because my belly might be more comfortable. Ride to Highgarden, my lord. Make your alliances. If you come with banners to make a challenge when Stannis has taken the throne, I will meet you with law again." Renly stood, graceful even when angered. "You deserve a better world than this one gives you, Lord Stark," he said. "But it will not give it to you." He threw his cloak over his shoulder and left with speed enough that the bells startled with the draft of his going. When he was gone, Ned felt the day sit on his shoulders. "He will bring Loras Tyrell," he said to the empty air, to the ghost of his dead friend, to no one. "Then he will bring flowers to a war," Barristan said from the shadows near the window. He had hardly moved since the dinner began. "They are pretty when they ride and dangerous when they fall. We will plan as if he is coming, but he will not be here tomorrow. The lion will." Tywin's raven arrived at dawn the next day, its black eyes like polished seeds, its beak sharp with outrage transmuted to ink. He demanded his daughter's release, his grandson's restoration, and the heads of the men who had touched them. He would bring an army to teach the law its place. "That will not be necessary," Ned said to the parchment. "We know the law's place. It is here." He wrote a reply that tasted like iron to the quill and gave it to the bird with hands that had held long johns to his children's flailing feet in winters past. He sent out other ravens with other words, to Dragonstone, telling Stannis to come at once with what ships and sworn men he commanded, to Riverrun, promising assistance against raids that stank of lion, to the Eyrie, asking Lisa to be who she had been before fear made her smaller. He did not waste the ink. That very morning Bywater brought Janos slint up from the lower depths, fat, sweating, blustering, his eyes snapping from wolf to watchman to white cloak, the way greedy men's eyes always measured where the best coin glittered. Ned stripped him, name and cloak and coin. When he remanded Janos to the Night's Watch, Slint finally found fear, and it did not look becoming on him. "My lord," he whined, "my lord." "Mind your oaths," Ned said, and he remembered saying it to boys at Winterfell and to men who had been boys once and forgotten. "The realm must be guarded. Guard it where your lack may do less harm." He nodded to Bywater, and Slint went down into the castle he had thought he could buy and did not see the light again in that hall. Tyrion Lannister entered the city by the King's Gate 3 days later with a dozen sellswords and a face like a man who smells the sea and likes its rot because it is honest. He had left his father's camp with a mouth full of oaths and a pocket full of ruses and had found both compromised by a road that threw royal patrols across his path like dice. Bywater's riders brought him to the Red Keep, where he dismounted with a grunt and a wry half-laugh and looked up at the walls he had not expected to see so soon. They took his sword politely and led him up to the Tower of the Hand. By the time Ned entered, Tyrion had made himself at home in a chair much too large for him, feet swinging, hands folded, examining a carving of a boar that ran along the table as if the wood were a forest it would never escape. He looked up as Ned came in and gave a little nod. "Lord Stark," he said, "may I say I am pleased to see you alive? I had heard the city had eaten you and left the bones in a gutter." "The city misremembered," Ned said. He took his seat. "You have come to parley for your father." "I have come because the camp at the crossroads is full of men with less humor than I like to see in men who share my tent," Tyrion said. "And because my brother told me to. He thinks I have a gift for words where he has one for steel. My father thinks I have a gift for both when it serves him and for neither when it does not. Neither of them is wholly wrong." He kicked his heels once on air, a child's gesture turned adult by the effort of not minding. "You have thrown a lion in a cage," he went on. "Be very sure of the bars. We have confined a lady and her children for their safety and the realm's," Ned said. "No harm has come to them. No harm will." Tyrion said. His eyes were like wine in sunlight, pretty at first glance and easy to misjudge. "And what do you want from us?" "I want your father's army out of the Riverlands," Ned said. "I want an end to raids that burn farms and hang men from bare trees. I want Ser Gregor Clegane's head for his crimes." Tyrion looked amused. "You are starting modestly then." "I will be satisfied with modesty," Ned said. "I will also have Stannis Baratheon's coronation unchallenged by your house. Your father can attend and bring his banners to set in line as they were in Robert's day. Or he can refuse and be named traitor to the crown he helped raise. You say this with Stannis 2 days' sail away and Renly galloping in the gardens," Tyrion said. He tilted his head. "You have a way of making a small room feel like a court of law again. Because it is," Barristan said from the hearth. He had come in with a quiet that would have been stealth in a lesser man, and was simply the manner of someone who had learned to set down a step where it mattered. Tyrion's gaze took him in and nodded a little. "Ser Barristan," Tyrion said, "down from your dais to walk among us sinners." "I have walked among sinners longer than you have walked," Barristan said. "Do not mistake my presence for a favor. It is a reminder." "Reminders and favors are cousins," Tyrion said gently. He looked back to Ned. "I will take your demands to my father. He will ignore them. That is my advice. In the interim, may I see my sister?" "You may," Ned said. "Under guard." Tyrion smiled an actual smile then, more mouth than teeth. "We're all under guard," he said. "Some men just have prettier jailers than others." Dragonstone's ships showed like low, dark teeth on the horizon just after noon 5 days later, sails black against a pewter sea. A rain had come with morning, rinsing the city's stink-down alleys as if a half-hearted god had poured a basin and changed its mind halfway through. The wind had the iron scent of weather. The bells of the September tolled without agreeableness. Ned stood on the ramparts and watched the first of the galleys draw near, carved prows snarling. On the lead ship, a man stood in a cloak like weathered stone, bareheaded, jaw set. Beside him, a woman whose red silk clung to her in the wind was a flare of odd color in the gray world. Behind them, a plain-smiling man in rough woolties, Davos Seaworth, if Ned's guesses held, adjusted his footing like a man who understood boats better than gods. Stannis Baratheon came ashore with 20 knights and a manner like a law that had put on boots. He looked at the city like a puzzle he distrusted. "Lord Stark," he said when they met in the yard. The words were greeting and test both. "You have made a mess that looks like order." "We have held the castle," Ned said. "We have held the law. We await the king." Stannis's mouth considered the possibility that it might smile and rejected it. "And you want me to be him?" "I want you to be yourself," Ned said. "You will not be loved for it, but the realm will know where it stands." Stannis looked at Barristan with a sliver of something almost like respect. "Sire," he said. "Your Grace," Barristan said, dropping one knee to stone, sword presented hilt first, head bowed. He did it as if he had never done it except this once and had been born for it. The courtyard breathed in as he did, and exhaled when he rose. The red woman's eyes were on Ned. He did not like the way she looked. It felt like a palm pressed to his chest, weighing, not quite cruel, but not kind either, the interest of flame in dry wood. "The Lord of Light favors truth," she said. Her accent made truth sound like a different word than the one Ned had grown up with. "The old gods favor silence and oaths," Ned said. "I will keep to mine." He inclined his head to Davos. "My thanks for your speed." Davos touched his brow with 2 fingers and looked slightly abashed, as men do when you say aloud the practical work they do without fanfare. "Tide was fair," he said. "Better than most things these days." The coronation was not a pageant. Stannis had no interest in pageants. The High Septon's voice was oily as usual, but Stannis knelt and rose like a man shouldering an old pack he meant to carry a long way without complaint. The crown sat on his head without beauty. He spoke words without grace but with precision, the way carpenters speak when they set beams as straight as they can and leave the flourish to painters. The hall did not fill with love. It filled with a kind of wary relief. This, at least, was certain. Cersei watched from a balcony, permitted by law and cruel courtesy. Her face was a mask of gold hammered thin over something waiting to break. Joffrey did not watch. He refused in such a way that it was best he be absent. Tommen cried afterward in his mother's arms and then stopped, because he was a boy who made of himself what the room needed, and the room had stopped weeping. Afterwards, in the Tower of the Hand, the council assembled new. Stannis named men with a brutal kind of efficiency. The Master of Laws was a man who cared for laws and not for whose enemies they were. The Master of Ships was Davos, and the gaped mouths of men of noble birth were visible gifts. Ned remained hand until Stannis said otherwise. He did not say otherwise. Varys remained because even Stannis did not think it wise to set fire to all his webs at once. Pycelle was dismissed with scant ceremony and replaced with a lean maester from the Stormlands who had never seen a Lannister's gold. Tywin Lannister remains at Harrenhal, Ned said when the first fire of talk had died down enough for other fires to be seen. He has gathered his strength. He will move. Let him move, Stannis said. We will move him back. It will be a war, Barristan said. Not a pretty one. I do not require my wars to be pretty, Stannis said. Only necessary. That is what we all say at the start, Barristan murmured soft, as if he had not meant to say it aloud. The room heard and chose to hear it as something else. They sent word to Edmure Tully to hold the fords and promised the crown's banners would ride to him. They sent a royal writ naming Gregor Clegane outlaw and commanding all good men to deliver his head for bounty. They nailed one to the gates of the city and one to the sept and one to the doors of every guild hall. Sandor Clegane laughed openly when he read it and drank himself asleep on a bench in the yard. In the morning he was sober as an axe. When Barristan rode out at last, at the head of a host gathered from Crownland's lords whose names meant more to ledger books than to songs, there were Stormlanders among them in good order, and a scattering of riverlords who had cut their way free of raiders to join the crown for the first time since Robert's rebellion had become a habit rather than a history. The City Watch's best men marched with them, Bywater's hard-faced company, not proud to be there but proud to be what they were. Barristan had chosen a horse that did not look like Pride. It was big and plain and could run all day. He wore white over mail and his sword hung quiet. Ned stood on the gate of the gods and watched them go. Beside him, Arya leaned between crenels and squinted as if she could force the column into a braver picture by willing it. Sansa stood a pace back, hands folded, mouth set. He looks like a story, she whispered, meaning Barristan. He looks like a man, Arya said, and there was admiration in it that had nothing to do with lace and everything to do with how one holds a blade. He is both, Ned said gently. The stories begin as men and women. We remember one and not the other. If we are lucky, we remember enough. The battle that followed at the Mummers Ford was not the old one minnows and troubadours would later sing. Beric Dondarrion was not the only man who held a line that day. Barristan's host reached the ford at dawn, where the Lannister men had been crossing for 2 days, burning and laughing. Gregor Clegane's men had a way of seeming to infringe upon sanity simply by riding. They were the shape cruelty makes when you give it a shape. When Barristan's vanguard crested the low hill and saw the smoke lifting from farms, the burn in his voice made messengers sit their horses taller. "Banners to me," he said, and the white of his cloak caught the early light in a way that made even the plain horse look like a charger for a breath. The ford itself was wide and shallow, stones slick. On the near bank, a thatch of poplars made a kind of ragged screen. Barristan placed his archers there and sent 2 companies to the left, into the low marsh where men thought cavalry could not move. He had ridden enough fields to know what men thought and how often they were wrong. He held the heavy horse back on the road, where the ground was good for hooves and for dying. He sent a runner to Dondarrion's scouts to tell them where to cut and where to fall back, and when the gray noon came out of a low fog, the first clangor of the day rang like a cold bell. Gregor Clegane rode like a wall on legs. He struck the first line by the ford and broke through 3 ranks of watchmen in a single shove, leaving bodies that looked like meat that had offended a butcher. Men shouted and died. Barristan slid his horse from the road to meet the gap, his sword out, breath even in his chest as if he had been sleeping and risen to take a cup of water. He came in low to the big man's right where the shield was not and cut, not for the killing blow he would not have. A man has to be a fool or a singer to think a single stroke cuts down the mountain, but for tendon and for balance. His sword bit chain, found flesh, and drew a line across Gregor's thigh that made the big knight's head jerk. Gregor bellowed. He swept his own blade in a murderous circle and Barristan was already not there. He did not chase the killing stroke. He cut at a horse's knees instead, sent it crashing under its rider in a thundering explosion, then wheeled and shouted. Not words precisely, but the rhythm of orders a host could use to keep from becoming a butcher's assembly. Bywater's men held in groups of 5 and 6, shields overlapping, pikes braced slow and low. The Stormlanders pushed the ford with the calm of men used to rain and worse. Dondarrion's riders came like a black-brown wave from the poplars and hit the Lannister flank where their armor did not expect a blow. The Mountain hacked his way free of his wrecked horse and came for Barristan on foot now, murder in his shoulders, a kind of simple doctrine. Barristan gave ground one pace, then another. He looked very old, and then he did not look old at all. Clegane, he said, and the name was a challenge and a remembrance both. He thought, while his blade slid and turned, and he was very aware of the precise angle of the man's right elbow, of Sandor in the yard, and of the boy who had come to King's Landing once and been burned for no reason better than a brother's childishness. He thought, I am old and this is a mountain. He thought, I am the law. He feinted high and cut low. He was not trying to kill the man, he was trying to make him slow. He wanted Gregor to bleed. He wanted him to lose heat. The big man roared and swung. Barristan stepped in and thrust for the small target a giant offers that most forget. The inside of the elbow where mail does not cover because it cannot. The point bit and the big sword faltered. Barristan stepped away before the backhand could take his head off. He was no longer thinking. He was doing. There are no songs that can make exact the sound a field makes when one side begins to be less sure. It is not a cheer. It is not a scream. It is a change in the angle of noise. Barristan heard it and knew that whatever else this day would cost, they were spending the right coin. He lifted his blade only when the Mountain left him to carve at a knot of Stormlanders who had planted their banner in mud and would not move. He let the man go, because to chase a beast is to break your own line. He turned his horse and called the men in on themselves and pushed, not hard, but steady, the way a door opens a stuck hinge. Past noon, the ford belonged to the crown again. Gregor took a wound a man should not be able to ride with and rode anyway, blood pattering off his boot like the first patter of rain on stone. He would not die that day. It is rare that men you need dead oblige you when you ask nicely. But he left men behind who would not rise again, and he left their courage with them. Barristan sat his horse in late light and watched his men count their dead. He took off his helm and held it on his pommel. He felt the sweat run down the inside of his cheek like a tear no one would mistake for grief. He thought of the boy he had not killed and of the woman in red with eyes like coals banked for a winter night and of the old man in the Tower of the Hand who was trying to build a world with law and oaths, like a man trying to build a raft of ice. Sire, Bywater said, coming up beside him, still gaunt, still every inch what he had been in the yard. We held. We did, Barristan said. His voice was hoarse, as stone is hoarse when you grind it against another stone. Gregor lives, Bywater said in a tone that did not promise a long life to men named Gregor. He does, Barristan said. He will die another day, wasting from wounds we gave him, or laughing in a tent after sacking a village. There is some mercy in not knowing which. He looked at the river. We held, he said again, and it was not victory, but it was not loss. In King's Landing, Sansa visited the Queen's apartments under guard and stood just inside the threshold with hands folded, feeling the press of 100 counsels in her head and finding none of them fit her mouth. Cersei looked at her with an expression that was not unkind, which made it worse. Have they told you to hate me? She asked, almost gently. No, Sansa said. She had not been told to hate anyone. She had been told to be careful with her words, as if they were dishes in a cupboard that might break if she kept moving too fast. She thought of Joffrey's mouth when he shouted, small and cruel. She thought of the way Sandor had stood very still. She thought of her father's eyes, like winter water, and how he had made himself soft when he spoke even when the room made him hard. I am sorry, she heard herself say, and did not know which of the people in the room she was apologizing to. Cersei's mouth twisted. So am I, she said. But neither of us is sorry for the same things, child. I used to think it would be simpler, Sansa whispered, and felt heat rise in her face. I thought if one was born a lady, and had a good heart, and learned the steps of the dances, one would be safe from what everyone else must be. And now I do not think so. Cersei laughed softly, and the sound brushed the air like a knife sharpened on silk. There is no safe, she said. There is only sooner and later. Sansa held her hands more tightly and felt the press of her own fingers. I think there is right, she said, so quietly she was not sure she had said it at all. Cersei's laugh blew it away. Down in the yard, Arya had stolen a practice blade and was knocking it against another boy's with little economy and much joy. She stopped when Sandor Clegane's shadow fell over her. He looked at her the way dogs look at bright, strange birds. You've got all your fingers, he said. For now, she said. She lifted the blunt practice sword. Do you want to try me? He snorted. You haven't got enough blood to make it worth staining my boots. He paused. Keep your point up. Don't look at the steel. Look at the shoulders. She looked at his shoulders. They were enormous. Will you teach me? I'm not a knight, he said, with a kind of pride that had no banner. I'm a dog. Dogs can bite, she said. He met her stare. So can girls, it seems. He moved away, and she made herself look at men's shoulders, at how they moved before their blades did, and she kept her point up. Tywin did not come at once. Men like him never came at once. He sent outriders, probes, letters like stones thrown at windows in the night, and then, when his counsel had been given and his fury had eaten its meal and lay down to dream, he called banners in a way that would not embarrass him if he had to pretend it had been something else. He would not march on the city while Stannis's navy lay in the harbor and Barristan's host held the fords. He would pull back and wait for Renly's flowers to bloom. Renly came as promised, of course, not to parley, but as a rumor, bright and broad, carrying the reach before him like a mantle of green. He wrote a letter full of compliments and advice that contained no compromise and named himself king in careful, courtly strokes. Stannis read it and burned it. Ned watched the black curl of ash and said nothing. He began to think more carefully about food stores and the state of the city walls and the coin paid to men who see to the hinges of gates. On a quiet evening broken only by the sound of gulls like complaints written down and filed, Stannis called Ned to the Tower of the Hand. The king stood at the window with the city spread below him like a sullen child. The Red Woman sat, uninvited, near the hearth, half-shadowed, as if she had been waiting there before the room was built. You have done as well as any man could, Stannis said without preface. Better than I would have. I would have hanged more people. It might have gone worse. It would have, Ned said. Stannis nodded, accepting facts the way another man might accept a cup of wine. I will need to send you north. Ned lifted his head. Your Grace, your son will have ridden by now if he is his father's boy. Tywin will try the Riverlands again when the Reach keeps him safe from my south. Renly will look at us and make flowers of his swords until he has enough of them to feel safe. The North must be kept from being dragged into a Southron farce with too much blood. I need you to go home and hold it. I need the Warden of the North to be the Warden of the North. Stannis's face was stone in the weather of his own stubbornness. I will give you letters to every lord in the North. I will tell them this is my will. Not because I think they will not obey you, but because I like things written down. Ned stood very still, as a man does when the ground under him that he had assumed to be stone reveals itself to be a raft. My daughters, he said. They will remain here, Stannis said. Safe. Safer than they would be traveling roads that belong to other men. The queen is contained. The boy is contained. The realm knows that if it touches your children, it touches you, and then me. I will not have that. He looked at the Red Woman. And I am told by some that I will need you in the north when a winter comes that does not belong to our calendars. Melisandre's eyes were embers banked to keep heat for a longer night. The night is dark and full of terrors, she said mildly. The Lord of Light is not a god to the taste of old men in God's woods. But darkness will not pause for taste. I have my gods, Ned said, and was surprised to find his voice even. They have no interest in thrones. That is why I like them. Stannis made a sound that might have been a laugh if someone had taught him to laugh more as a boy. Do not mistake me, he said. I do not like sending you, but I will do what the realm requires. So will you. He inclined his head the barest fraction. Go north. Hold it. The rest of this will go as it goes. When the lions and stags are done roaring at one another like boys in a yard, there will still be winter. Ned closed his hand around the feeling in his chest. It had edges. I will go, he said, but I will not leave in the night as thieves do. I will leave as a man leaves his table. He told his daughters after the supper plates had been cleared and the last light was dusting the city with something almost kind. Sansa listened with stillness and at the end, nodded. I will be a lady, she said. I will help the queen. She stopped, corrected herself with effort. I will help the queen's jailers keep her safe. You will be yourself, Ned said. That is all I ask. He looked at Arya, who had put her blade under her pillow as if it were a doll she did not want to share. You will mind Septa Mordain. You will listen to Ser Barristan if he tells you the sky is falling. You will not go looking for it. Arya scowled. I can do more here then. You can do more here by living, Ned said, more sharply than he intended. He softened it with his hand on her hair. By living and learning. The world has too few people to teach. Be one who learns. Teach me to use ice, she said, abrupt. Ice is not for you, he said gently. You have your own blade. Small things can make holes in big stories. He kissed the top of her head and did not notice until later that he had trembled. He left the next morning with a small guard of Northmen who had straggled into the city over weeks of confusion, and with a paper sack of food Sansa had buelled the kitchen into assembling by sheer force of doing kindness out loud, and with a little stone Arya had put in his palm without speaking. It was smooth. He did not know why it mattered, and then he did, thinking of the godswood and the way river stones feel from being held by water for centuries. He put it in his pocket. Barristan watched him ride out, and then went to the yard and ran a whetstone along his blade, the motion steadying his prayer. Stannis stood on the wall and watched the gates of the gods shut, his face thinking 3 winters away. Melisandre turned her face up and let the sun touch it for as long as it would. Outside the city, the country was already changing color. Fields that had been green 2 weeks ago were brown where men had ridden. The smell of rot had a different nature in autumn. Ned rode with his jaw clenched not from cold but from not speaking the words in his throat. Sometimes duty is not a flag or a sword. Sometimes it is the act of turning your horse's head toward home, while other men handle the fireworks you do not trust yourself to carry without losing all your fingers. War did not stop because men made orderly decisions. Renly's banners moved on summer's breezes and stopped when they met politics. Tywin's host shifted like a weight on a shelf, testing the supports, waiting for a hand to remove a prop. The Riverlands had a brief, hard breath between raids. In King's Landing, the small folk adjusted to saying "Your Grace" to a man who did not smile and began to make little jokes about how an honest man at the head of a country is like a kept oath, useful but not delightful. The Queen played Syvass with Tyrion through bars of spoken propriety, and sometimes she nearly won, and sometimes he did. Joffrey sulked and threw goblets at walls when no one could see and pretended to be above it when they could. Tommen learned to read quicker than anyone expected. Myrcella practiced the harp and made of it a soft sound that chased some bitterness out of the rooms it came into. Bywater's men patrolled streets that seemed more like streets and less like tapestries for a while. Syrio Faceless turned up one morning on a ship bound for Bravos and bowed to the city as if it were a man and he had forgiven it a debt it did not know it owed. Sandor Clegane drank with honest men in the yard and did not cut open any of them when they said stupid things. He watched girls at practice with a face that pretended contempt and hid a gentler disdain, the kind that makes a man say, "Keep your point up," when no one asked. Barristan's sleep came, in parcels. Sometimes he woke with the smell of hot metal in his nose, sometimes with the image of a boy's mouth drawn down in the ugly way anger draws down mouths. He held his sword when he did not need it. He spoke less. When Stannis asked his counsel, he gave it in short strips that could be bound together to make a rope or fed to fire to make a moment's heat. Stannis was not a man to waste rope. A raven from Winterfell came down after a week like a heavy thing dropping from a high shelf. It read that Ned had arrived at Moat Cailin with the first of the guard and taken measure of the neck, that he would hold there until roads were known and banners loyal and disloyal were counted. It read that the air smelled of wet earth and that the north had less use for kings than songs claimed. It read, in lines unwritten but legible to men who could read the space between words, that a man had gone home. Barristan folded it and set it aside and went to the yard to watch boys with blunted swords trip over their feet, and for once did not correct them. Some things can learn without you. The day the first leaves fell in the Kingswood like fat coins, Tywin moved. He did not come to King's Landing. He drifted along the edge of where his strength was unquestioned, burning oats he did not need to make points he thought he did, and sending messengers who did not bow correctly because they were chosen for their ability to ride fast, not for their knowledge of how men bow in halls. Stannis sent Barristan to meet him near Duskendale, and the two hosts eyed one another across fields that had felt hooves already and did not want more. They did not fight. Not then. Tywin measured the White Cloak, and the White Cloak measured the Red Lions, and someone in that maddening arithmetic found a sum of delay. They backed away, each telling himself he had taken something the other did not see. It is possible both were right. It is more likely neither was. On that night Barristan sat on a low stool before a fire in a soldier's tent. Not his, and ate onions out of a pot and bread so hard it fought his teeth. A boy with a rip in his sleeve told a joke about the king's frown that would have lost him a head under Ares, a tongue under Robert when he was drunk and remembering being a prince of summer. Stannis, who was not there, would have fined the boy and told him to quit the habit. Barristan said nothing. He thought of kings like weather, each with its own hunger. He thought of a girl with a needle and a dog with a burned face and a boy who would be a man in a world that would punish him without teaching him what he had done wrong. He put his hands out to the fire. They looked very old. They were very steady. When the first snow found the edges of the high road north of the neck, Ned Stark stood under a weirwood whose face had not yet learned the griefs of this generation and told it what had been done in the south. He did not ask for forgiveness. The gods of the north were not a confessional. He asked for strength. The wind took the breath from his mouth and made it visible. He watched it go and thought of his wife's hands and of Robb's stubborn chin and Bran's silence and Rickon's wildness. He thought of two girls in a city that had nearly eaten their father, and of an old man in a white cloak who had chosen, finally, to keep the oath the world had meant by the one it had asked of him. He turned his face into the wind and went about his work. Back in King's Landing, Melisandre lit a candle before no idol anyone else could see and watched its flame with the intimacy of a lover. "It gathers," she said to no one. Stannis signed papers. Varys sent letters. Bywater bought rope and grain. Sansa walked in the gardens and learned plants by their leaves rather than their stories. Arya learned the difference between a cut and a bruise and how to see either before it happened. Sandor did not laugh and yet was also not miserable. Tyrion wrote to his brother, who wrote back with half jests and a seriousness beneath them. Jaime Lannister had not known how to carry until his sword work began to require his full attention for at least a few hours a day. Cersei waited. Barristan Selmy slept with his sword in reach and dreamed, not of glory, but of halls where law was a voice men could hear when they weren't trying to shout over it. He woke before dawn and went to the wall and watched the city hold its breath between seasons. He had lived through kings who burnt what they were supposed to keep warm. He had killed for men who did not deserve the blood he had given them. He had taken a boy down from a throne and walked him to a room where he would not be killed. He had kept his oath and he had broken it, and in breaking it had kept it at last. He folded his cloak around himself, listened to gulls, listened to his own heart with its old stubborn beat, and listened to the sound a realm makes when it is trying to be better than the men who run it. It is not, strictly speaking, a sound. It is more like a pause in noise. It is the place where a blade stops before it cuts. It is the law unsheathed but not yet swung. It is a kind of hope. He stood there until the light came, and then he went to war again.